Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Narcotics News. Today, I am joined by James Hutchison, who is an attorney on our general counsel at OBN, to discuss his time at OBN and legislative changes for this past session. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, good morning. It's good to be with you.
So first of all, as a member of general counsel, what does that mean exactly?
So the Bureau is kind of unique in the sense that we have actually a statutory provision that allows the agency to have its own attorneys. So a lot of state agencies will contract with the Attorney General's office and get kind of their general lawyer advice, if you want to call it that. They contract with the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General provides a lawyer to that agency. But the Bureau actually has in-house lawyers that handle all sorts of issues. Now, it's called the General Counsel because it really is general. So we handle everything from employment issues with the agency all the way up to wiretaps and drug prosecutions and different things like that involved in narcotics. And we advise in Fourth Amendment issues, Fifth Amendment issues, those kind of things that the agents actually deal with out in the field and stuff on a daily basis.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a very broad range.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I didn't realize that the general counsel met with judges throughout the...
Yeah, so it's kind of unique. There's a couple different scenarios, but basically where OBN lawyers come into play more than anything is going to be on your wiretaps. So this is in Oklahoma, it's under Title 13, the Security of Communications Act. Basically, in Oklahoma, there's a set list of crimes that can be investigated and you can get a wiretap for. So when you're doing, and one of those crimes is drug crimes. Okay. So and I'll explain a little bit about how that process works and everything and what you have to go through to get a wiretap. But essentially we have, let's say we're doing a drug investigation. We have an agent that will present an affidavit to both the district attorney for whatever district in Oklahoma that we're dealing with. The Bureau has statewide jurisdiction, so we deal with all of our district attorneys across all 77 counties in Oklahoma. And then when they're going for a wiretap, we have to communicate with the local district attorney for that district of a specific target that we're looking at. And then we also have to go to the Attorney General of Oklahoma, and both the district attorney and the Attorney General of Oklahoma have to submit an application to the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals to authorize a wiretap. The only person in the state of Oklahoma that can authorize a wiretap is the presiding judge of the Court of Criminal Appeals.
Oh, interesting.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of a lengthy, cumbersome process to be able to get something like that going. And it involves kind of checks at the highest levels to make sure that we're doing it in compliance with the law.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting, though.
Yeah.
How did you find yourself at OBN?
Well, I actually came to OBN by pure happenstance. So I'm a recent graduate from the University of Oklahoma College of Law. I graduated. Congratulations. Thank you. Boomer Sooner, baby. But I do have my undergrad from Oklahoma State. So it's kind of I can root for both sides, but I'm still Boomer Sooner all the way. Now, so how I came to OBN. So when I was actually in law school, OU offers a mentor program for all of its law students, and it's completely voluntary and you sign up for it. And I got assigned a volunteer. He worked in state government at the time. He worked for tourism. And then we actually had a couple of meetings. One of those meetings was kind of a lunch meeting with some other people that worked in state government. And a couple of those people, one of them is actually Josh McGoldrick, who is now back at the Bureau. At the time, he wasn't at the Bureau, but he'd worked here previously. And both him and another attorney were like, oh, you would really be interested in what they do at the Bureau of Narcotics. And I knew what the Bureau of Narcotics was, but I didn't know that it wasn't really on my radar at the time. And when I was going to law school, I didn't intend on graduating and being a normal lawyer, if you say, coming out of it.
What was your goal originally?
So I have an interest in national security issues and international affairs. I completely thought that I was going to go to law school and graduate and go work for the State Department or some federal alphabet agency and go work overseas and probably never set foot in the U.S. again. But that we had that kind of fortuitous meeting and everything. And the attorneys there said, hey, let's give you the general counsel's email at OBN and see if they would be interested in taking on an intern. And at the time I was interning for Tulsa County in the homicide division.
Wow.
And so I, reached out, kind of a cold email just out of the blue. And then I get a phone call and they're like, we don't normally have interns, but we would love to meet with you.
Oh, you made
and so it kind of all fell into place. And then right about the same time that was happening, I got a call to do an internship with the Northern District of Oklahoma. So that would be the summer between my 2L and 3L year. And OBN was gracious enough to say, yes, we'll let you go with them for the summer, but then come August, you have to come back here. And so then I started as an intern at OBN in August of 2021. And fortunately, I made a good impression because I was able to work that whole year, and they gave me a job offer after I passed the bar. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's really cool too, because as you said, a lot of agencies don't have their own legal counsel. So people might not know that OBN has positions for people who study law. Right.
No, exactly. And that's the beautiful thing about the Bureau. It's pros and cons, right? So
of course,
a lot of people don't know what the Bureau does, but given the scope and scale of the Bureau's kind of enforcement powers and what we're mandated to do, there's really jobs for everybody and stuff you wouldn't normally think of. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm a lawyer there. We've got an entire HR team, the entire fiscal team. We've got property and evidence. We've got, of course, the agents and the actual, men and women that are out there on the front lines every day. But there's compliance. I mean, from the top down, if it's a job that you think of, IT, anything. I mean, so it's really a great place.
I definitely didn't think that there would be like a training specialist position at law enforcement, which is really funny when I interviewed and I was like, oh, I didn't actually know this job would be like possible. So
well, and that's one of the really amazing things about the Bureau is a lot of people that do know OBN as the law enforcement agencies. They look at us as state police, state agents, and everything like that. What they also don't know is in the Uniform Controlled Dangerous Substances Act. So that's found in Title 63, Chapter 2. That is the establishing statutes for our agency. In those statutes, we're actually mandated to provide training and education to the public on issues of drugs and drug enforcement and those kind of things. So we have a whole separate part of the agency that's just devoted to both training internal agents, training other law enforcement, and going out and teaching the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny too, because, I've had such a great experience learning more about law enforcement because I actually knew of it from the medical side because my parents are registrants. Okay. So I didn't actually realize the importance that OBN had for all of law enforcement. So it's funny because I actually knew the flip side. I didn't see that part when I came in, but it's been really great to learn about because it's not something that I knew about before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. OBN's got a big role in the state, and you bring up the registrant side. That's another part of the agency. Part of our powers as the state law enforcement agency enforcing the UCDSA is we enforce the regulatory aspect through our registration system, which authorizes manufacturing, prescribing, dispensing, distributing all CDS in the state of Oklahoma or into the state of Oklahoma. So even those entities and doctors and things that are, you think of your national chains, they have to be registered with us to be able to ship controlled dangerous substances into the state of Oklahoma. So there's a whole regulatory arm on top of the law enforcement arm, on top of the training arm. I mean, it's literally we do so much.
But yeah, I think one thing I really like about this podcast or the potential to do it is like educating people about it because people just don't really know exactly what OBN does. Like you said before, like there's so much stuff and people don't really know. I actually studied political science. And I don't think it was mentioned in my classes before. Well,
and that's the beauty of it. I mean, we do so much that there's not a job out there that, we can't find a good fit somewhere here for. Right. Political science majors, statisticians, anything like that. I mean, you think about it, So every year we publish a what we call a drug threat nexus. And so we kind of look at data and different things and compile it for the state and say, okay, what are drug trends that we're seeing? Where do we see ourselves, 5 years down the road? What kind of policy changes do we need to be making now? That requires data scientists. That requires, STEM majors and people that can go in and work in data analytics and put that kind of stuff together. And it requires, political science majors and other people that are more interested in the policy side, because we kind of work hand in hand with the legislature every year to ensure we're putting out good policy and we're on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean, there are jobs for, all kinds of backgrounds,
Yes.
I know, of course, that our OBN executive assistant, Lauren Frost, but she used to be a dance teacher before.
Yes.
So
shout out to Lauren. Congratulations on being Miss Oklahoma. But Lauren is a perfect example of that. She was able to come in as an executive assistant for the deputy director and really help him out just in her normal everyday job. But on top of that, handling social media, handling, various aspects of training, this podcast, all sorts of things. So, there really is a fit for everybody here. Yeah. It's finding a niche about what you're passionate about. And I think if I could give any advice to anybody that's interested in a job like this, our number one priority is public safety. So if you have a real passion for public safety and you want to feel that you absolutely make a difference in whatever it is you do, whether it's running stats or going and arguing in court or, carrying a badge and a gun and going out there and enforcing the law, whatever it is you do, there is a place at OBN that could potentially help you shine. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's so amazing too, because I feel like people at OBN really want you to develop yourself as a career,
Absolutely.
Even if you start in one place, they don't want you to stay in one place. They want you to obviously grow and continue to learn things and gain new responsibilities. So I think that's definitely a good place for people to start and to grow as well. Absolutely.
One of the main things I love about the Bureau, even though we are kind of spread out and we've got statewide jurisdiction, it really is relatively small. So everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody really is a family. And you kind of hear that to the point where it's cliche. But legitimately at OBN, I mean, we're all family. We're always, celebrating new babies being brought into the world.
Yeah.
And, everybody gets all excited. And, we're there when people go through, more tragic life events and stuff. But we really are kind of a home away from home.
Yeah. And one of the things this podcast has been really cool for me too is that I'm not technically a shy person, but it definitely makes me have to meet people.
Yes.
So
yes.
That is really cool because I've been reaching out to people that I probably wouldn't have normally.
Yeah.
And trying to meet people all across the different divisions, all across the offices. I just
you
send cold
spectrum.
emails. I'm like, hey, any interest in coming on a podcast?
Yes.
Who are you?
And in all fairness, Hannah has reached out to me. I think this is the fourth time we've rescheduled this. Third or fourth. Yeah. So some of us get a little busy. I tend to let my work kind of make me a little busier than I probably should be. But
hey, I don't judge there. I honestly, people who become busy because they try hard, respect all the way.
Yeah,
I'm totally fine with rescheduling. No problem. So
we make it work.
Yeah, we do. But another cool aspect, as you said, OBN does deal with policies a lot. And of course, as legal general counsel, you have gone to the Capitol to help with the sessions. So
yes.
What changes are going to be relevant for people within law enforcement, general public, or even registrants, for example?
I'll back up a little bit. This last session was pretty interesting, but really it kind of started last legislative session. So that would have been 2023 for me. And we had a couple bills and everything that we were wanting to go in and kind of fine tune some things in the UCDSA. And I'll shout out Mark Woodward here. Mark Woodward has been at the Bureau for almost 30 years now. And he's been the public information officer and the legislative liaison for probably as long as he's been at the Bureau. And he really does a phenomenal job, and he's made a great name for the Bureau down at the Capitol. And he's also built a lot of very good relationships with different representatives and senators and probably more importantly, their staff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you ever need to know someone, you ask Mark who it is.
Yes,
I ask him all the time because
he knows everyone. But it was really kind of cool. So in 2023, we had a couple bills that we were going through, and me as the lawyer and kind of the policy wonk, like I helped draft a lot of those. And so kind of how that process works, generally speaking, it can work a little bit in a little bit different ways. But typically, if you want a bill to get heard, you will go and meet with a senator and a representative, and you kind of pitch to them this idea. And then you say, hey, I want to make this happen. And if they agree with you, then you try to, they can be authors of your bill. And then it has to go through a whole committee process. So once you have an author of a bill, you come up with language, and typically we try to write most of our language, but the House and the Senate both have staff attorneys that if you have kind of an idea, you can pitch it to them, and they'll come up with some language and try to accomplish basically what you're trying to accomplish. But we write our own, and so we'll go down to the Capitol and identify who we think would be a good senator or a good representative or somebody we've worked with quite a bit. Give them an idea, present them a bill, and they will author that bill and then send it to committee. And so then once it goes to a committee, and there's a host of different committees in the House and the Senate. Once it gets assigned to a committee, it gets taken up. And that's kind of the opportunity for other people outside of the author. That's the opportunity for those committee members to really chop up the bill. And if they want to make amendments or they want to make changes to it, that's kind of where that happens mostly. And then once we have kind of a final product there, they will pass it out of committee, and then it'll go to the floor in, let's say, the House. It goes it passes the House, then goes to the Senate, passes out of the Senate, then goes to the governor. Okay, that's basically how it works. But the Bureau has had a fortunate opportunity to build those relationships with the people down at the Capitol that we can really go in and say, hey, this is a bill we want. This is why we need it. And I think for the most part, everybody down there understands we're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes.
Right.
We're just trying to make things very clear for the public, very clear for law enforcement operating and drug enforcement specifically. So we try not to make too many drastic changes. Sometimes it's just cleanup. Gotcha. And this year especially, it's been a lot of just cleanup. So one of the things that happens in Oklahoma's legislature, and it's started to happen a little bit more in the last couple of years, like I described that whole committee process earlier, right? Well, a lot of times you'll have a bill that starts in the House and simultaneously starts in the Senate, right?
Interesting, yeah.
So it's the same language gets presented both. But let's say the Senate committee amends it slightly differently than the House committee. Okay, so now they say two different things. They pass out of their respective chambers, then go to the other ones. If it doesn't get fixed and it passes out of the other chamber and then goes to the governor can sign them both. And there's an attorney general opinion from several years ago, and I'm not going to give you the citation because I don't know it off the top of my head.
Don't worry.
But there's an AG opinion from several years ago that basically says if you have two bills that pass in the same session that amend the same statute. So let's say we're talking about 63 OS 2302, for example. What you end up with is two equally valid laws. And then you have to get the lawyers involved to say which one is the actual law. Right. And for the most part, they read very similarly. But then you get into issues of statutory construction. If they conflict, if it's a direct conflict, okay, right, then you have to go with whichever one was passed later. And sometimes it literally, like I have had to consult with the House attorneys and the governor's staff and figure out what time a bill was signed. Wow. Because we had an instance where we had a conflict and there was a bill that was signed at 11 something in the morning and one that was signed at 2 something that afternoon. And so the one that was signed at 2 something that afternoon is the one that's later signed. Yeah. So it creates a whole issue. One of the things that I did this year was I went through the entire Uniform Controlled Dangerous Substances Act. And every statute that we had multiple versions on. So that's where we have like 2 or more of the same statute, 2 different versions. Basically went in, wiped out one, and then amended it down to the single version. So, and I got a little bit of pushback from this, even from my own boss, Travis White, the general counsel. I put all the definitions in alphabetical order, and how that process works is there's a lot of like strike through and a lot of underlining and different stuff like that.
Oh, so you're the reason why I said that.
Yes.
So it's your fault. No,
yes. So I was getting calls from representatives and senators like constantly about like, what is OBN trying to redefine this as? And I'm like, I'm not redefining it. I'm just putting it in alphabetical order so it's easier to read. And they'd look at it and I'd point them to where we were striking it and stuff. And they'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So that one was like the most pushback we got was they couldn't figure out why we were trying to redefine all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm literally just putting it in alphabetical order. You will thank me after. And so now all of the definitions are in alphabetical order. I'm really happy about that.
I appreciate it in the future, I'm sure. I mean, I will admit that I also look at the titles, of course, because that's related to what I do too. But I do have to mentally be like, I'm like, which part of the sentence goes back to the other part?
Yep.
Because the strike throughs. But I still appreciate it anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a very complicated process. But I think the legislature appreciates us because I will typically draft the language. And so what I give them for language, because the House lawyers and the Senate lawyers will like finalize and fine tune, and that's what actually gets written in the bill. I think they appreciate that because I can give them like a 90% complete work product, and they've only got to worry about like formatting and some different stuff like that. So try to make their job easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And one thing that I was really proud of when I first learned about it was just how many firsts OBN has. You know, like as someone who didn't really know much about OBN, like coming in, I had to learn a lot. But there's a lot of things that we have done things that were like first that have become national or at least like statewide things.
It's kind of one of those things. Law is always an interesting subject area because, you look at the world around us today, it looks like we are evolving at a rapid pace. I think that the Bureau is really a great melting pot for that because we've got so many people that, there's guys that have 20 plus years of service.
Oh yeah.
Men and women, 20 plus years of service at the Bureau. And that experience is something that you cannot teach. I mean, you have to, have lived it and, gone through the meth lab days of the 90s and the marijuana days of today and kind of, to be able to fully understand and appreciate kind of what's going on. But at the same time, there's that kind of mutual beneficial relationship where you've got some of the younger ones like us coming in and we can say like, hey, this is how we learned how to do something or whatever and benefit from that experience and be able to really incorporate and integrate those in ways that nobody really thought possible. I will say the Bureau, out of most of the state agencies that I've seen, is probably one of the most adept at both adopting new technologies and incorporating it into how we do our jobs and everything. I mean, our drone program, for example,
right?
It's one of the top programs in the country, if not the world,
right?
And it's really incredible to see what we've been able to do with technology and kind of assisting law enforcement and really protecting the public in just integrating those technologies. The PMP, another great example for that. And Jessica may touch on this a little bit when she talks about registration, but I'm going to steal her thunder for a little bit. Oklahoma is actually the OBN specifically. We created the whole prescription monitoring program.
Right.
Like it was invented by us back in the 90s to kind of figure out and monitor prescriptions and identify doctors and different bad actors that are overprescribing and things like that. We created that system, and that system has now been duplicated and modified 100 times over, but every state in the country has now adopted what we created.
Right.
So that I think that's pretty incredible that OBN has had not only an impact on the state of Oklahoma, but an impact on the nation just in how we do drug enforcement and both on the law enforcement side and the regulatory side.
Our Take Back Box program,
Yep.
that one's also a first. So there's a lot of impressive firsts at OBN and that I don't think people know about.
Yeah. A lot of people, if they do know OBN, they have this image that comes to their head of like black helicopters and like spooks in the night and stuff. That's not what it is at all. I laugh every time I hear that kind of stuff. But, one of the things about part of how we do our job, just the nature of drug enforcement, is it's not always going to be a headline.
Right.
We could have stopped, whenever we stop a truckload of fentanyl, or we bust, a meth lab or different stuff like that. That's not something that's always going to make the news. And it's, and if it does, it's just kind of, 10-second clip and
Right.
people move on. They don't understand the work and effort and dedication it takes to get to that point of a takedown and how many lives are potentially saved because, those drugs are now off the street.
Right.
I love OBN, just the very small footprint that we have a very outsized impact and everything we're doing is just incredible every day just to be able to sit back and watch it from my perspective. So
I like that analogy a lot that you said.
Small footprint, big impact,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Sometimes I come up with catchy phrases, not always, but
Well, at least this one's recorded, so you can have it for the future. So
yeah. See, there you go. I can always come back to it now. So it's been a pleasure talking with you today and kind of getting to sit down with you. I know our schedules don't always align, and Hannah is one of the hardest working people in the agency. I'll tell you guys that
I don't
right
know
now.
if that's true, but I appreciate it. But thank you so much for coming on to the show today. It's been a pleasure for me as well. And I think that it's going to be some great information for our audience. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.